for more, we're going to go live now to radio host Cary Harrison and Steve Gill, radio host and political commentator. Welcome you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Steve, if we can start with you, actually. So, Oxford authorities claim the initiative of stopping drivers from using busy routes in peak hours is aimed at helping both the economy and the environment. Do you think this is the way forward? Will it be worth the inconvenience for drivers?
Well, when people can't get to the businesses there, I'm not sure how that's going to help the economy. And as the commentator pointed out, we used to always get the excuse for every public policy argument that it's for the children. Now it's always for the environment. In Japanese, there are two words for truth. There's hone and tatamai. One is truth and one is the real truth. And unfortunately, I think bureaucratic governments all over the world tell a truth, but don't really tell the truth of what the purpose of this agenda really is. And I think that's why people are skeptical of it.
Well, Cary, I mean, the move has caused quite a stir, with some critics saying it's a suicidal experiment leading to a complete dystopia. Do you agree with that assessment?
That is the most dramatic thing I have heard in probably 2.5 weeks. When I moved to Los Angeles 20 years ago, the air was unbreathable. The traffic congestion is still absolutely impossible, making the city unlivable. 10-lane freeways, no public transportation, nowhere to go. Do people stop driving? Yes. Do they stop hanging out and visiting? Yes. Are there parking spaces available? No. So what has happened is people have gotten Vespas and bicycles. I know it's a radical idea in Los Angeles. You're not going to see the Kardashians on one, but for the first time ever, people will actually go and have lunch together. It seems like a radical idea, but if you like clean air, if you like to be an upright being that is able to get from A to B comfortably without being smacked by a car, sometimes you might have to limit it. We can remember historically how this came to be. In the 1920s, Los Angeles had the finest public transportation in the world. Rewatch the movie Chinatown. You'll see evidence of that. Cable cars, trolleys going from downtown to the ocean in 10 minutes for a nickel. Unbelievable. Then in the 1950s and 60s, General Motors, that makes automobiles, Firestone, that makes 4 rubber tires per automobile, got together, paid off the city council, pulled all of the public transportation out of LA, and now we're stuck with multiple lanes, 14 million vehicles, all to go across 36 little cities with no town hall, nowhere to go, and it's pretty horrible for people.
Well, Steve, I mean, to counter that, local residents will have to apply for a permit to drive through the filters on as many as 100 days per year. How is the idea of such restrictions compatible with the principles of basic human rights, such as the freedom of movement?
Well, first of all, I don't think people are just getting in their cars and driving at random. Most of them are going somewhere. They're going to work. They're dropping their kids off at school. They're going to meetings. And I would argue that in LA, when they had 10-minute trolley rides for a very low amount, it's because people were living in a relatively compressed area. And in LA now, where you have people living 20, 30 miles out of towns, the suburbs have grown dramatically. When you're an hour or so drive from downtown, you can get on your bike all day, but it's going to take you 2 or 3 hours to get to town, 2 or 3 hours to get out of town. That's not a workable system any more than in Oxford, when you have a town that was built hundreds of years ago with narrow streets. It was not anticipating vehicles. You're going to have to deal with the reality of an old town with small confines and with people wanting to get in and out of those areas for work and business and to take their kids to school. You got to deal with the reality, not the idea that we can put trolleys in or some sort of a monorail system like Disney World and move people around rapidly on a relatively easy schedule.
Well, Cary, don't you think that the Western democracies have somewhat over-focused on the Go Green agenda, already crossing the boundaries of rationality? Some critics would argue this, and some critics would also argue that protecting the environment is just a cover-up for introducing more control and surveillance over people.
If that were the reason, and we could discover that, absolutely, I would be right there with everyone else, pulling my sword from its scabbard. That would be outrageous, but we don't have evidence of that. Oxford, going back to about 1145, when the Castle of Oxford was built, there were horses, people on foot. Look at Europe with its beautiful public transportation. Zurich, one of the top 2 places on earth to live, with unbelievable systems. If, in fact, this is where they want to go and create a quality of life that surpasses everyone, then that's a good thing for the upright mammals that live there, especially people that want to shop there. If I can't get my car down a cobblestone street and can't park it reasonably or be able to afford to park it, I'm not going to go. I'm going to use Amazon.
Well, Steve, while the West urges the world to go green, it does not refrain from opening coal mines, for instance, like we've seen in the UK recently. Don't you think this seems a little hypocritical?
Well, you've got Germany, cutting down forests now to use firewood that's going to pollute a lot more than the cleaner energy sources available. And I would add an agreement that I think we are environmentally cleaner than when we had horses going through downtown Oxford and people were walking down those cobblestone streets ankle deep in manure, when there wasn't indoor modern plumbing and people were just tossing their waste on passerbys out on the streets. I think we've made an awful lot of progress with technology, and we ought to be looking at technology as our answer, not simply trying to subscribe to some unicorn. The energy fairy is going to provide our energy sources out of our wall sockets, whether it's dealing with coal, whether it's dealing with uranium or anything else that might be a power source. Let's use some technology and not go back to the old days of walking through horse manure.
Well, Cary, if this experiment is said to be aimed at reducing pollution and protecting the environment, why do you think so many environmentalists are the ones that are voicing their concerns?
Well, I wouldn't say so many. I mean, we hear of a couple, but then everyone is not going to like anything any government does at any time. And I would agree with Steve, except he mentioned Walt Disney, who created Disney World, which is still a modern for excellent transportation, a wonderful model that people relish, and, it makes billions. People come from all over the world just to see how you can go from A to B. I don't think we would want to rip up successful public transportation, whether it's in San Francisco or anywhere, New York City, burrowing underground called a subway, because somehow fill in the blank, we should use different technology. Sure, let's use different technology, but let's talk about that technology. Let's just not throw stuff out there and then have no way to explain what it is. Therefore, bad syllogism, everything else is lousy. It's not. If an effort is being made to improve things, and let's assume that the City Council of Oxford is some sort of democracy and that a vote was taken and the public was involved to some degree, unless we have evidence of otherwise, then we either like democracy or we don't. They can stand on their heads if they wish. If they want cleaner air, they want a better way to get around from A to B, to have less collision, less people knocked down, more people on bicycles, and an easier way to get from point A to B, and service stores without having to figure out a way to park, then let them try the experiment. If it fails, it fails. And it fails in front of all of us. We now know never to do that again.
And the last question to both of you, and we'll start with Steve. Do you think that the public is actually ready to accept these changes realistically?
I don't think so, and I think he makes a great point that let's put the rule in place and then let the public vote if they're not getting to vote in advance. And when they throw the city council members out who put it in, we'll see what the public really thinks about. And I'd also point out that in Beijing, you have millions of people on bicycles. It's one of the most polluted cities in the world because it's not just transportation that fuels pollution.
Cary?
He's absolutely right. It's called coal-fired power plants. Happily, we don't have any in Oxford, so that's not an issue they have to deal with. In Los Angeles, where the air doesn't have a color. Oh, yes, it did. Orange for decades. Watch old TV shows. You'd be like, I think that's a car going by. That was able to be removed by making these kinds of changes, which ended up being a benefit to the people. So we know portions of this are a good idea, but how it's exercised and executed by Oxford, well, that's still yet to be revealed.
Radio host Cary Harrison and Steve Gill, radio host and political commentator. Thank you both.
Thanks, guys.
Are you moving cross-country? You've heard the horror stories about some moving companies. Rude employees show up who aren't careful with your valuables and may even lose them. Then, after their poor, unprofessional service is complete, you get to pick up the pieces while moving into your new home. At 1-800-PACK-RAT, we've got a much better method. You start by calling us for your free no-obligation quote. When you're ready, we'll drop a container off at your location. You pack your valued possessions at your leisure. They stay safe at your home. When you're ready, just call us. We'll pick it up and give you a schedule date of when your furniture and possessions will be at your new home. Our all-steel portable storage and moving containers ensure your items are safe and secure, because our top priority is providing the best customer service in the industry.
Call 855-348-4699 now for your free quote. That's 855-348-4699.